We're in Chesterland, Ohio. It is Sunday, April 27th, 1997, and Mom is going to fill us in on some really nice memories that she has and things that might have been different years ago than they are now. So, Mom, it's all yours.
All right, I'm going to talk about the olden days.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were married in Germany in 1907. My mother's name was Martha. Thienel was her maiden name, Thiemel. My father's name was Bernhard Suffner. And I did not know my father's parents. They died very young. And my mother's parents were Mathilde, and the father's name was August. He had a farm, he was a farmer and had a butcher shop. And as I remember, every year they had a big celebration. It was a combination of church and family. So Grandma always baked many, many good kuchens, and we couldn't get enough to eat then. We had a wonderful time. One thing I remember about my grandparents that was not so good, they had an outhouse then, and many times we didn't even have toilet paper. Either they had a catalog cut up that was good, or newspaper, but there were times that we had to go and get large leaves.
Oh, my.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, and we played with our cousins there. It was really nice. The early, well, I really don't even remember that, but in 1914, when the First World War broke out, my parents had my sister Margaret Gretel. She was 6 years old. Hubert, he was 5. Bernard was 3.5. Herbert was 1.5, and I was 6 months old.
Wow.
And my father had to go to war. It was very bad. Yeah, turn it off. My mother was quite courageous. She ran the butcher store and raised us 5 children. She had some lady come in and help take care of us. But during the war, she also had double pneumonia. She was very sick. And we were living in rent, and the butcher store that we had was also in rent. And after the war was over and my dad came home, he bought a large house with a butcher store in it and several other stores. And we moved in there. So, and about a year later, we had another little girl, Bernadette, but she did not survive. And I don't remember too much about those times, except that early in the 1920s, we had a huge inflation. One day, we had a money bill that was worth about $1 trillion, and the next day it was worth 1 penny. We could buy one penny candy with it. In 1921, my mother had another little boy, Joseph. We called him Booby, like Sonny here. And in 1924, she had the youngest one, Leonard. Now, I remember when I was 4 years old, I was so stubborn. I said, if I can't go to school now, I don't ever want to go to school. I guess I was lonesome. The other ones were in school, and I was home. So then, let's see, that's about all I remember of the 20s. Then in the 30s, when I was in high school, I had to beg my father for a whole year to let me go to high school because it was very expensive. And I was the only one in our family who graduated from high school.
Oh, really? Oh.
So I was a year behind the others because I was one more year in grade school. And my father just plainly said to me, well, do you want to work towards a career or you want to get married? If you want to get married, you're not going to go to high school. That was his idea. But my dad was very strict, but he was a hard-working person, getting up about 5:30 every morning, and of course he expected us to do the same thing. And the butcher shop went fine. My sister had to help much more than I. She was 6 years older. She had to scrub the floors and wash the windows and everything. But we had fun. We kids had fun. We didn't have much to play with. We had bicycles. We ran around, and the lamppost was the safe place. We ran around trying to play catch. And then sometime later, my parents had a vegetable garden, but that was about 10, 15 minutes walk away from our house. And they grew potatoes and strawberries and just about anything I can think of. But I don't remember the first few years of school. There was the Catholic church not too far from us, and on one side of it was the boys' public school, on the other side of it was the girls' public school, and we never got to get together during school. I mean, that was separated.
Yeah.
But it was good schooling, and then after my 5th grade, normally after 4 years you go to high school, but I went after the 5th grade. And we had, at first it was a private high school in a house, a very strict lady. And several years later, the Ursulines came and they built a beautiful, huge school outside the city. And that's where we all went then, all the students. It was about half an hour walk, summer and winter, or 15 minutes. There's a bicycle, but in the winter you couldn't ride the bicycle, and we had no bus, only a bus that went out of town. It was very, very nice in school. We had some very good nuns. One nun taught me piano, and she had hoped that I would go on, but I guess I wasn't gifted for it. And let's see, my oldest brother, he learned to be a druggist, not a pharmacist, a druggist.
What was the difference?
Pharmacist, you can fill prescription drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Druggist, you can't. And he eventually opened a drugstore.
Oh, so like he would sell over-the-counter
Over
drugs.
the counter, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but not
Okay.
prescription drugs. And my sister and I were good friends, but we were so many years apart that, you know, when she started dating, I was still a little kid. And she used to go and play tennis quite a bit, but she was a very pretty girl, very attractive and very popular. So my second oldest brother, he learned to be a butcher, but then he joined the police, Bernhard. He died, well, Hubert, the oldest one, died very young during the war he had stomach ulcer and was operated on, and they didn't have enough nurses. They had set a glass of water next on his nightstand and said, but don't you drink it unless somebody comes. He poured it all over himself, got pneumonia, and died within a few days.
Mm.
That was sad. He was only 27 or 28, and his wife had one little baby, and she was several months pregnant with the second one. That was a hard time for her. Bernhard, the second oldest, after he became a butcher, he didn't like it, so he joined the police force, and he served out of town. And the strange part is, during the Second War, he was put into the army, and Herbert, my next brother, who was born in 1912, he learned to be a cabinet maker. And when he joined the army, when the war started, they put him from the army into a special police force. You could never understand that, but that was Hitler. That was another story. Hitler was so conniving, so smooth. At first he gave the children a day off on Saturdays, because we used to go to school 6 days a week. Then he started picnics on Saturdays. Then he started marches on Saturdays. Then he started picnics and marches on Sundays, so people couldn't go, children couldn't go to church. That was his idea. And then he made those young people stand like in strike lines against the Jews. And my parents had some close friends that were Jews. And the one Jewish family, they were so generous. They gave, they supplied clothing and food for a whole orphanage. And then during the war also, my two youngest brothers were drafted, and Joseph, the second youngest, he was in the Air Force, but with the maintenance crew. and he was killed during the war in Letland. That's, I don't know if it's part of Russia or if it's by Russia. But before this happened, the youngest one was only 19, and he was in the army, he was on the train, and he was supposed to watch the pot-belly stove that heated the train. Apparently he fell asleep, and when he woke up, it was in flames, and he got so scared, he jumped out the train and got killed. The only one that got killed there.
Okay.
During my high school years, we had some very good times with the nuns during summer vacations. They would plan trips for us either to a mother house or into the mountains. Of course, we had to pay, but it was very, very memorable. And the girls became good friends that way. I had 2 girlfriends, and we had quite a few pictures together. The one was an excellent swimmer. She was in competition many times. But that poor soul now, even though she's younger than I am, has arthritis so badly she can hardly walk. And during the war, her husband was missing and never returned from Siberia. But she raised a daughter, and that daughter now has a son who wants to become a doctor. In fact, he's finished with high school, and he is working for a medical company.
What is her name?
Steffi Kiesler. Her last name now is Lutt. Steffi Lutt. In the meantime, when my sister was 16 years old, she wanted to wing out for herself, and she went, since she had quite a bit of experience in my father's butcher store, she sent out applications to different towns, and she found a job with a butcher family in Berlin, near Berlin, in Brandenburg. And over there it was very nice. If you worked for that family, you had a room, lived with that family, you were part of that family. And that gave us, my parents, peace of mind. And then after that she got a job close to the Baltic Sea. She enjoyed it there too. Then somehow she got the idea she wanted to see the world, and one of the older ladies that took care of us children when we needed her had a daughter here in America, Mrs. Schrader, and she sent her the application to come here. So after Margaret was here, she came here on November 5th, 1927, and she was the Schraders were very nice to her, and they helped her find a job. She had different types of jobs. And she was also in a small place that Mr. Schrader, with the German people, he put together some place, and she was in it, and she was always a star.
Mm.
And so she had many friends, girlfriends and boyfriends. And she did meet her future husband, Max. Excuse me. This way. And in 1932, she was engaged, and she came home to spend some time with us, spent the summer with us, and she had her trousseau made. She has many beautiful linen pieces. So, and then she went back, and they got married right in New York. They had made arrangements in a Catholic hotel. There is a chapel there, and Max came there, and my sister had her wedding dress made by her girlfriend, Hilda, but she wouldn't dare try it on. I had to try it on. She thought it was bad luck. So they were married November 5th, the same day that she had come 5 years before to the United States.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Now, this was in New York?
That was in New York.
So did Schwaders go to New York?
No, they were just by themselves, and they were a couple nuns.
Oh.
The hotel was called the Leo House.
The what?
Leo,
Oh.
L-E-O,
Oh,
Leo
really?
House, yeah.
Oh, my.
In fact, many years later when my parents came, we went, Daddy and I went to pick them up, and we stayed at the Leo House.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyhow, after my sister, then she had Ruthie, a little girl, and 3 years later Norman, and she wanted my parents to come and visit them very badly. But my parents, by that time, they were, I wouldn't say wealthy, but pretty well off, and they were afraid to leave the big huge house with by that time there were 3 stores and a furniture factory and 12 apartments. Some
So
big
they
and some
owned all
small.
that.
They owned all that.
Oh my.
And they didn't want to leave it, so my father, just kiddingly, said to me, "Why don't you go?" And I took him by his word. I didn't let him back out, and I went to the travel agent and made arrangements. By that time, I forgot to mention that, I had gone into, after my sister was visiting, I went into nurses training in 1931, 32. When did I graduate? In 1935 I graduated from nursing school, and that was away from home. But it was very good education. So then I went to visit, I wanted to go and visit my sister, but her husband said instead of, by that time you needed a visa. When my sister came first, you just needed an application in 1927.
Hmm.
So in 37, I needed either a visiting visa or a permanent visa. And my sister and her husband, they filled out the permanent visa. They said, in case I'd like to work here, I can always go back. But what my parents had in mind, they wanted me to come here, take care of my sister's husband and 2 little children, have my sister use my return trip ticket, visit them, then they would have bought her a round trip ticket and reverse the procedure, but it didn't work out that way. Margaret didn't want to go, and I don't blame her. I mean, now I realize I don't blame her. So we went to different hospitals trying to find me a job, but they said you better learn English first. I had English 3 years in high school, but by the time I came, I had forgotten most of it. So St. John's Hospital said that they would hire me, but for 6 weeks I would have to work without pay, which I understand they wanted to see. So I worked there for quite a while, and I was told that I had to take state board, just like the doctors or anyone else that comes from another country. I would not have passed it with my knowledge then, but fortunately they require 4 years of English, and I only had 3. So I went to night school and I had private tutoring to teach me English. And then the next year when the state board came around, I went to Columbus and took the state board, which was horrible, for 3 days.
3 days?
3 days, oh yes.
My.
But in fact, one of the ladies that walks around and helps us out said, "You're asking so many questions," because my English was still very bad. I can't help you all the time. And one day I remember especially, before we went in, some of the girls talked about Florence Nightingale. I said, "Who's that?" She said, "Well, we are having the test on nursing history." I had never heard of Florence Nightingale before. Somehow I must have, and also we had to write an application and an essay. I would like to read them now, what they sound like. But somehow I passed. At first, I didn't think so, because the other girls, by that time I had changed hospitals, because St. John's could not give me all the time off that I needed to go to school. So the Lord provided. There was one patient at St. John's Hospital who had been in a car crash. Her pelvic was broken. She lived on my sister's street. She wanted somebody that could come stay with her day and night. So we made arrangements. I had a bed in the same room that she slept, and she had a string on my wrist and one on her bed, so she'd call me during the night. And she said I could take all the time during the day to study, so that's what I did, and that really helped out. Yeah. And so in the meantime then, a girl across the street from my sister, Margaret Piper, was a nurse at Lutheran Hospital, and I was looking for a job then, and she said, "Well, why don't you come?" That was before I took the state board, actually. She said, "Why don't you come? I'll take you down and put in your application." So we went down, and the director of nurses read my application, and she said, "You know, we're not hiring now." And I said, "Well, I mean, at least I have the application in." And when she got finished reading the application and what experience, whatever I had, she said, "When can you start?"
Oh.
I said, "Tomorrow." She said, "Yeah."
No.
And that's where I met Daddy.
Oh, yeah, he was in for...
He was, well, after, that was in early in 38. He was in for a tonsillectomy. And he was on, in those days they kept you overnight at least.
Mhm.
He was there either 1 or 2 days, I don't know. And I think what caught his attention was he was in a 4-bed room. And across from him was a minister who could talk German and sing German. And when I used to come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, we used to start singing, he and I. And Leo just couldn't understand how anybody could be that wide awake. So he contacted one of the orderlies. At that time, I lived at my sister's house and communicated to the hospital. And then I had found a place much closer where other girls, other nurses lived. It was sort of a boarding house, very nice. And when I was, by the time Daddy did get my address and phone number and everything, my sister's, of course, he called her and then she would tell me, and you know, that I don't know, I faintly remembered him, but I didn't know just who he was. So she said, he'll probably want you to go out. What are you going to say? I said, well, what should I say? She says, well, say why not. And poor Daddy, he was so nervous when he called that one time that he got me, maybe every time he went to a payphone, I don't know. He called, and when he did get me, and I told him, sure, why not? He was flabbergasted. He didn't know what to think of me.
Thought you were pretty forward.
So, yeah. But anyhow, and that was in 38. And then early in 38, before Valentine. And in 1940, we got married. And we lived on the 3rd floor of a double house in Lakewood. It was very nice there. So it was crowded, but it was nice. And I remember Mrs. Graves used to tell me, you looked at Leo's family before you got married because you wanted that family. And well, then what, about a year later?
Now, Dad worked
Dad at that time.
nights, didn't he? Didn't he work nights when we lived there?
Well, when you were a baby, he worked nights. No, at
Oh.
first he used to work different places. He worked at Strong Carlisle Hammond, an office job. Everybody that he applies to wants to put him in the office, and he does not like office work. So when he quit there, he worked at Western Auto as a stock boy. That was hard work for him, really. In fact, when we lived in Lakewood on the 3rd floor, that's where he worked. We lived off 140th, and he worked off 140th, pretty far north of Lorraine, and he worked on 110th and Lorraine and had to walk every day to work. We didn't have a car.
So how long of a walk was that? How
Oh,
far?
about an hour, I bet you.
Oh, my goodness.
And he could have taken 3 different buses, but it would have taken him just as long.
Mhm.
The same when I went to visit, we wanted to visit his parents. Took an hour to walk or an hour to take the, imagine now?
Mhm.
And some winters I was very worried about him. It was really hard snow and it would be much, much longer than an hour, like you wondered,
Mhm.
when he came home. And, well, then Barbie came along.
Mhm.
And everybody was thrilled. So we still lived upstairs. And we had the tiniest bedroom. We had one bed, a double bed in it, a dresser, and Barbie's crib. That's all that fit in there. But somehow we managed. And Grandma insisted when we first were married that she wants to do the laundry. So we had to take it over, or they had to come over on Sunday night and pick it up, and then I would walk over Monday and help her.
Didn't you have a machine?
No,
Oh, so
No.
if she didn't do the laundry, how would what would...
probably would have had to go. I don't know if they had laundromat then or what. But she wanted to help, you know. But let's see. We didn't have a newspaper. We didn't have a telephone. Daddy rolled his own cigarettes.
Mm.
So, but we did pretty good. when I went shopping, I took the baby buggy, you know.
Mhm.
But to do that, I had to carry Barbie downstairs in the basement, lay her in the basket, go back upstairs, bring the
To
fold
the
up,
third floor.
third floor,
Third
bring
floor.
the folding down the buggy downstairs and put her in. But I didn't think anything of it then.
Mhm.
You know, that was life.
Mhm.
So then, when did we move in? Oh, during the war it was very hard to find anything, and the fellow that Daddy worked with, I don't know where he worked with him, was moving away from Pearl Road across the street from one church. I don't know what the church is. He had a place there that we could move. Oh, by that time we had Maryland. I'm getting a little confused. With Barbie, we moved in a little house on 137th Street. It's a very small house sitting in the back.
Behind Zoller's house.
In the front, yeah, in the front were Italian people living.
Oh.
Then later they were Zoller's.
Oh.
And we were in the back, which was very, very nice, really. In the meantime...
Except for the first, what happened when you first moved there, the people before had a dog or...
Yeah, when we moved in there, I didn't feel anything, but Daddy just kept scratching, and he looked in the bathroom and on the floor, and the more he looked, the more scratchy he got. He had people that lived there before us, had a dog who slept on the bed, I guess, whatever, and the whole place was infested with fleas. They didn't bother me. We actually had to have it exterminated.
Yeah.
And so, oh, and in the front, the Italian people, their daughter and son-in-law lived with them, and they had a cute little girl, Tony.
Oh,
you remember
Tony?
Tony?
Well, the pictures.
The picture, yeah, yeah. And Barbara and Tony played really nice together. In the meantime, Daddy's sister Ruth had married, just before Barbara was born, married Frank Regina. And they had bought a house even before they were married on West 138th Street. And they lived there till Frank was drafted. He had to go to war in 1942, because Barbie was a year old when we went to the terminal. And she was walking around there, and somebody said, "You walk like a drunken soldier," drunken sailor. So anyhow, Ruth had asked her parents if they would like to move in Ruth's house, because it was not an up and down, it was easier for her mother. And she agreed, and they rented out the house on 137th Street.
So the house on 137th is where Dad's parents had been living?
Yeah, for many years.
Okay.
Originally they came from Brooklyn, but they had been living since before I met him.
Okay.
And
that house was next door to the
that little house
that
where
you
we
lived. We
yeah.
lived in the back.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So this house was rented to a middle-aged couple and a single sister of the wife. And Ruth suggested that we rent her house, and she'd get the other people out. But when she told them to move, they had the audacity to say, "We had just hoped that the war would last long enough until my husband retires, so we can go south."
Mm.
Anyhow, she did get them out, and we did move in the house in the middle of the winter, but it wasn't far. There was no fence between the two houses, so that was easy to move. And we lived there for a while, and then we had why did we move to Brooklyn? Oh yes, Ruth wanted to move. Ruth, in the meantime, then Frank had come home from the war.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived upstairs in one bedroom by Grandma's, in the house that Ruth really originally owned on 138th Street.
I didn't know there were bedrooms upstairs.
One
Oh.
bedroom.
Oh.
And they lived with a family.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted their own house, and they thought they will, instead of forcing Grandma back to 137th Street,
Mm-hmm.
they would live there.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had that impression, they mentioned that, we looked for rent, and you couldn't find rent, but a fellow that Daddy worked with said he had a place that he's moving out of, and we had to pay him. I think he had to pay him $50 at that time, 1944. By that time, Marilyn was born.
Mm,
No, wait a minute. No.
Because
She
I
was
was
born
5.
in 46.
She was born in 46.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when we moved out of that house,
Was she born yet?
no, maybe not. No, I don't think so. I think we
Okay.
just had you. Yeah. And, but it wasn't too nice a neighborhood. And the people there, well, they had little gangs or little, you know, they wanted to get Barbie
It was
involved.
next to or above a beer parlor, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, next to a beer parlor. People
Yeah.
hanging out the window and stuff. We were not happy. Neither one of us was happy. So then Ruth says, well, they really did not intend to stay in that house on 137th long anyhow. They hadn't even taken the curtains down or anything. And they looked for a place and they moved to Parma in a beautiful, small, brand new house
I
in
remember
Parma.
that, yeah.
And they said we could move back there and they gave us very reasonable rent. So we lived there. Oh yes, and that's where Marilyn was born in 46 then. In the meantime, I had a pretty bad sickness on my
Oh, yeah.
the reaction.
Yeah.
I'm telling you all sad things. An adverse reaction to medication, whatever it was. I broke out in blisters, and eventually my fingernails and toenails fell off, and my hands peeled, the inside and the soles. But after I got over it, and took about 3-4 months anyhow, the doctor told me he got a specialist, but he didn't. During the war, it was probably very hard. He used to tell me, yeah, the specialist told him to do this and that. Didn't help. I guess eventually it just had to work itself out.
So what was it from?
Probably either an overdose of morphine. When just before this happened, I had a miscarriage.
Mm.
And the doctor gave me morphine and phenobarbital, whether that was it, or I also had hay fever at the time. And I went to the same doctor, and the nurse gave me injections. There were 2 bottles of medication, and it said on the one to make sure to withdraw this first and then the other. Whether she made a mistake, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But my feet swelled up, my hands swelled up, and where skin rubbed skin, I got blisters. It was really bad. And when it was over and the skin came back, the doctor said, rub yourself all over with alcohol, that'll toughen the skin.
Ooh.
I could have screamed.
Oh, my goodness.
And he tried to tell me it was ringworm.
Oh.
So after Barbara was born, I started getting allergies. At the time, I thought it was a cold. Eventually, I had to go to the clinic for 350 back scratch tests, and they found out what I was allergic to. So they had my records there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had this terrible skin breakout, I went back to the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
They said no doctor ever called, contacted them, and they said if by that time my nails started growing back a little, they said if you had ringworm, the nails would never come back, or they would come back all crippled.
Mm-hmm.
They came back beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
So they took me off of all medication, hay fever or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, with old age, hay fever almost disappeared, really.
Mhm.
It's much, much better.
And when you had that skin
Yeah.
problem, you stayed at Grandma Doubler's.
Oh, Grandma Doubler and Grandpa Doubler
And I
were
was-
so good to
yeah.
us. Barbara was about 3 years old, and they even took the crib. They took me in. Grandma slept in a double bed with me, and Barbara was in the crib in the same room, and Grandpa went over. It was still in our little house, I think. I'm
Oh.
not sure.
Okay. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't know. And slept with Daddy in that little house.
Hmm.
Grandma was not afraid, and my mouth was so sore, even water burned.
Hmm.
And I couldn't stand anything, even the sheet was too heavy.
Mm.
But thank goodness eventually everything went away.
Mhm.
I went back to normal.
Mhm.
So then let's see, in 40, well, we did buy, Ruth even offered to sell us a house, and that was wonderful. She gave us a very good price. And we bought the house, and then in 46, Marilyn was born. And by that time, we had some very good friends. When was it that, Paula and Arlene, Arlene Armstrong and Paula and Martin, Paula and Eddie Martin, Arlene and Ralph Armstrong. We had good times together, and we used to take the children to Cedar Point. Daddy drove to Cedar Point, and we took our own lunch along, and we went on rides. We really had good times. We went to other picnics and outings. And let's see, after Marilyn was born, maybe shut it off a minute. I have to try and think what. I'd like to tell you some happy.
Okay, we're back, and it's
Okay.
1940.
Well, let's see,
No.
when Daddy, October 42, Daddy started to work at the NASA. That's where Grandpa was working. He had been there since 40 or 41, I believe. It used to be called NACA. He worked in the tool room. And it's a big place. Eventually it turned out to be the NASA. Excuse me.
Now, did you make tools, or did you, why did they call it the tool room?
Made.
Yeah.
That's what I
yeah.
thought. Okay, made tools. Okay.
We have a huge picture of Grandpa Dumbler, Daddy's father, with what is that? What is that picture? Somebody should have that.
That's
With
the
it.
barn, yeah.
But with a big whatever, what was it
Yeah.
that he made,
Huh.
that he worked on?
Okay.
And, well, now let's see. Oh, during the war, it was not so easy to fix a meal. One can of Spam cut up into a big pot of potatoes and carrots lasted us all week.
Mm.
We didn't have much choice. We had food stamps that we were issued to get certain things for during the war. With the one kind we could buy margarine or butter. No, with another kind we could buy butter. So my sister asked me to give her the butter one, and she'd give me the margarine one, and we were both happy. But the beginning, when margarine first came out, it was white.
I remember that.
And they had some, I don't know if it was saffron or some kind of a coloring powder that you had to mix it with.
Yellow, bright yellow.
Yeah.
I remember you
Yes. Mixing it.
mixing it in with the mixer.
See, yeah,
It'd be
yeah.
like you would have Crisco, kind of, and
Right,
you'd mix
yes,
this
and mix
yellow
it, yeah,
in with
right,
it,
that's
yeah.
right, uh-huh.
Mhm.
But somehow we got through, and Barbara took good care of Marilyn. We have quite a few pictures.
Except when
of
I
it.
let her fall out of
Yeah,
it.
when Marilyn was 3 months old, she accidentally got
Oh,
a fall.
that too, I didn't think about, yeah.
What else?
Well, you know, you were remembering when she was 3 months on the changing table.
Yeah, yeah.
And you asked me to watch her,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I would
yeah,
have
she
been 5 and a
Yeah,
half,
right,
maybe,
that was a
something
little
like
bit
that.
very young.
Well, but still, I must have turned my head, and
You
she
just
fell
turned
off.
and she rolled off, yeah, but it didn't hurt her.
No, no. Anything it gave her. She's the brilliant one. And
Yeah.
then I don't know how old she was, but I was pulling her in the wagon.
Oh,
We
yes,
were-
I remember that. You were pulling her in a
Yeah.
red wagon, red flyo wagon,
Mhm.
and you may have pulled a little, jerked a little, and
Yeah.
she fell out of it. But that
Yeah.
didn't hurt her.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. So, then let's see, when Marilyn was 3 years old, we had little Bernadette.
Mm.
We were very excited that she would be born on her 3rd birthday, but she didn't make it.
Well, and you, she had gone past the 9 months.
She had gone
Right,
a
yeah.
little past, yeah.
Yeah, and at that time, well, who knows whether the doctor...
Well, the doctor said that the cord was not wrapped around her neck, but it was wedged between her head and my pelvic bone.
Oh, so
That's
it
how he
cut off
explained
the
it, yeah.
supply.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was sad.
That was
yeah.
sad, but in the long run, Paula and her husband and Arlene and Ralph, we became very close friends.
Mm.
Also, Harriet and Johnny Bosco.
Mhm.
It's another couple. The 4 couples of us, we used to meet at least once a month in each other's house and played cards, and that was a good time. That was
Yeah.
really nice.
Is that when you played canasta?
Yes, we
Yeah.
played canasta. Oh, I'd still like to play canasta if I could find somebody that likes
Do
to
you
play
remember
it.
how? I don't think I
I
remember
think
how.
I would sort of,
Yeah.
maybe not the details.
Yeah.
But Harriet and Johnny eventually dropped out. Johnny got sick. He died of pancreatic cancer. And some years later, Harriet, who was a wonderful person, She had Lou Gehrig's disease,
Oh.
and she passed away,
Mm.
yeah. And then, by that time, let's see, in 49, 3 years after when Marilyn was 3 years old. And in July 50, Jerry was born.
Mhm.
And that was a big surprise, happy surprise.
Mhm.
I like the girls, but you know, every father wants a boy, and I like a boy too. So that was nice. And he looked so much like his grandfather that Mrs. Graves, a friend of Grandma's, couldn't understand why we didn't name him Herman, or at least give him the second name Herman.
He's probably glad he doesn't have the name Herman now.
So anyhow, at the time where you had a friend, his name was Jerry, wherever you worked, I don't know. And he was a nice fellow, so I said, oh, Jerry's a nice name, and then Leo,
Mhm.
second name. And 2 years after Jerry, Diane was born.
Mhm.
That was quite a big job, but we got through it. And what I remember is Jerry got punished more often for being nasty to Diane. And now it comes out, Diane admits that she used to tease him, egg him on to it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know, turn it out, I don't know what. Marilyn used to be a pretty blonde. She had very pretty blonde curls.
Yeah, real long corkscrew.
Yeah, course to natural, corkscrew curls. And Jerry and Diane used to tease each other quite a bit. He's the one that got punished, unfortunately. And then in 1956, Nancy was born. And she was just 10 years younger than Marilyn, and Marilyn really mothered her. She took care of her so much. She babysat for her when we went to meet with Arlene and and the others. And well, all our kids grew up to be really friendly with each other. When they were little, they were fighting. That's natural.
Mhm.
But, so let's see. That was. We still lived. When did we move? In 1969, we moved from 137th Street to Parma. And a little house, corner house on Debbie Drive. By that time, we still had Nancy at home, and let's see, and Diane and Jerry. Because Jerry, let's see, he was born in 50. At 68, he started college, but on the vacation, he came back home. And Diane started college 2 years later. It was a nice little house, corner house. We had 3 bedrooms on the first floor, and we had 1 large bedroom and a recreation room in the basement. The recreation room we turned into a dining room, actually. That's where we had celebrations. And when the children were small, we always had many Easter baskets and many birthday celebrations, and we had a lot of pictures to show them.
We would go to Grandma's house a lot of times for Easter?
Yeah.
And for Christmas
Yes.
celebration.
Right. And for Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
turkey.
Yeah.
And then one time, poor Grandma, she had brand new carpeting on 138th Street. And who was it? Somebody.
Norman.
Huh? Norman. Gary?
I mean Jerry, yeah.
Gary, yeah, I guess he had the misfortune to have to vomit.
Oh, really?
That was bad.
Oh, dear.
That was very bad. Grandma had a beautiful house, but the children were always a little bit afraid because she was very, very clean and they were afraid to get anything out of order.
Out of place, yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah. We used to go to her house before we had television.
Oh yes, Grandma had television before we had,
Mm-hmm.
and we used to go there and sit and watch. Edgar Bergen, wasn't he on? Or was it before television?
I remember Mama
Yeah,
and what was that other program? Man Against Crime?
Could be.
Ralph Bellamy, Man Against
Ralph
Crime.
Bellamy could be, yeah.
But
You
anyway,
remember more than I
we
do.
had fun going over there watching. I remember that.
Oh yeah. And we used to, on Easter, after the children got their baskets from Grandma, then we used to go to Aunt Margaret's, and she also had baskets, and we gave their children
I
baskets.
forgot
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So by that time, Margaret that a year after Barbara was born, Margaret had another little girl, Margie. And she now is in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. She has a big state job for education. I guess she teaches teachers, whatever. Let's see, when the children grew up, well, what else did we do that was interesting?
Put it on pause a minute here until we think of more questions. Okay.
We're going to switch back to some memories in Germany during the war. When my parents, they had that nice big house and all these businesses there. But my father wrote a letter on the 19th of September 45, and he wrote that for 2 years they hadn't heard from us, but they hope and pray that we are all right. And the town itself came through the war fairly well. Our house, our big house, only had a dozen windows broken into or shattered. In spite of that, we had to move 6 times. The only thing I own now is my working outfit and a cane. Physically, I'm fine. Mutti, that's my mother, is very weak. Shut it off.
Okay.
During the war, my parents were put out of their house several times. And in November, late November, when Margaret received a letter from them that said, "Dear children, we haven't heard from you for 2 years. In spite of that, we believe that you are fine. We pray daily for you." This letter is translated from the German letter that my father wrote. The war did not demolish our town too much. Our house only had about 12 windows smashed. We had to move 6 times since the invasion. At first came the Russians. During that time we had 25 women sleeping every night in our large living room to protect them from the Russian soldiers. On Easter Sunday, the Russians drove us from our home in the middle of our dinner. We were placed in a ghetto with 2 other families in one apartment. On Pentecost Sunday, we were allowed back and found the rotten food still on the table. Soon after that, Russia took a slice of Poland for itself and pushed the Polish people into Germany to take part of Germany for themselves. Physically, I am still all right, but Oma Zofna, Mutti, is very weak. Emotionally, we are both at the end of our rope. The only thing I still own are the clothes on my back and the walking cane. If we had wings, we would come in a hurry to you. Since March the 17th, we have no money, no food stamps, no radio, newspaper, or mail. That's probably why they haven't heard from us, because we have been writing. Through private people, we found out that Herbert and Bernard, our other 2 sons, and Cornelia are okay. Could you please send us a food package? Could you help us come to you? Our money is worth nothing here, and we don't have any Polish money. Oma's brother Robert, who had lost a leg in World War I, was killed because the soldiers thought he had fought and lost it in World War II. We have to obey Russian and Polish people now. We would flee to Halle, where Herbert and Bernard are, but it is too dangerous at the border. Besides, refugees are not entitled to get food stamps or care. Please write soon. Love and kisses to you, your children, and Liesel and Leo and Familie, your poor parents. So we did send them money, and eventually they were put on in cattle cars and transported to a refugee camp up further in the northwest of Germany. And they were there for several months. My mother's sister died of hunger typhoid there. And my mother also had hunger typhoid, and she had come down to about 69 pounds
And she was a fairly
And she
tall
was
woman.
a tall person, and she was not heavy set, but well built. And they had even left her behind when they moved my father. Eventually, they both could go where my two other brothers were, and they found a very small place to live there. And we have sent them packages since then. And eventually, they did get permission to come here. And on December 22nd, 1946, Daddy and I went to New York to get them, and we stayed at the same hotel that they were married, that Margaret and Max were married.
Did Aunt Margaret and Uncle Max go with you to get them?
No.
Just you and Dad?
Yeah, because only Daddy and I went. Now, we had little Nancy, little Marilyn, to take care of, and Barb, who was a little bit older, she was well-behaved. But Marilyn was only, from April to December, 7, 8 months old.
Yeah.
And Ruthie and Uncle Frank volunteered to babysit with them, but not ever having had any children, I guess they had quite a time. So when we came home,
How long of a...
we were
was
gone
this?
from the 22nd, we came back on the 24th or 25th.
Oh, so it was
Well,
only
we had
2
to
days.
we had to be there on the 22nd, so we left about the 20th or before.
Well,
of
maybe
December.
a week you were gone.
Maybe almost a week, yeah.
Mhm.
And we came back, it was at night, and we walked in the bedroom, we talked to Marilyn, and she recognized our voice.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
that's neat.
So, and then my dad didn't stay healthy very long, what is very unusual. They both had to go through severe inspections before they were allowed to the United States because they couldn't carry tuberculosis or anything, and they both passed. And they came Christmas, and of course my dad said on the train already, well, America, here we come, the streets are paved with gold.
And he really thought...
And he really thought it, and he had planned to open a butcher shop, a special butcher shop. And we had bought him a Golden Book dictionary, a large one.
I remember him reading that.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
studied hard. He wanted to start his business. But unfortunately, about 2-3 months after he was here, he started getting very sick, and his back hurt him extremely. We took him to the doctor, and he said that Grandpa had cancer of the bones. He must have had cancer of the lungs, but it
Oh.
wasn't detected. That's why it's so
Oh.
unusual
That he got
that
in.
he passed.
Yeah.
And of course, they were not as advanced then, and he
Mhm.
just laid and suffered for 6 months
Mm.
before he passed away in September of 47. The strange thing, when he was in Germany yet,